Hey A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P 1, Lecture Test 5, video, I think we're on 3, and we're starting on page 4 in the bit where it says Chapter 12, Neural Tissue. So here's our picture for Chapter 12, and then we'll look at the neural tissue. Yeah, I'm in the way. Still in the way. Okay, so the neurons are the nerve cells. Communicate, process information, control body functions. And then the neuroglia, they're called glial cells. So, but usually, not always, in science, the emphasis goes on the third from last syllable. So it's neuroglia, but then when you put it together, it's neuroglia. It's a thing. It's not a hard and fast rule, of course, like anything else. All right. So the neuroglia are the helper cells. They support, protect, feed the neurons. They take care of them. Very important. Many of the worst brain cancers are glial cell cancers. They're everywhere. And when there's an overgrowth of them, they're everywhere. So, what are the organs of the nervous system? The brain and the spinal cord are the organs in the CNS, and the sense receptors and the nerves are the organs in the peripheral nervous system. I try to say it out either slowly like PNS or peripheral nervous system, because they say when I say it fast, PNS, it sounds like I'm saying penis. And we're not going to talk about the genitalia until the end of next semester. So when I say penis, I'll be saying penis intentionally. And also those videos will be age restricted. So since I have a YouTube channel where I talk about genitalia. Just what I always wanted. All right, so let's talk about, this is a neuron. And we're going to draw a picture of a neuron with all of these main parts on the next page, not on this page. So let's continue. The CNS is the brain, which is this part, and the spinal cord, which is this part. It includes the blood vessels, connective tissue, the functions. Are you ready? We have a list of functions for the CNS. Integrating, so making things work together, integrating, processing, collecting sensory data, and sending motor commands. I'll pause here so you can rewind that and watch it again. The peripheral nervous system is everything outside of the CNS. So you've got all these little cranial nerves in here. There they are, cranial nerves. And of course, the spinal nerves. Which again together are the peripheral nerves, but peripheral nerves is too general a term to use on a lab test. Which organ specifically, excuse me, is the seat of the higher functions? I've marked it with what's supposed to be a star. The seat of the higher functions of intelligence, memory, learning, and emotion. The brain. And partly I want you to know that the brain does those things, and partly I want you to know that intelligence, memory, learning, and emotion are considered higher functions. So, dual purpose for that statement. The afferent division, I think we need the next slide. Here we go. Okay, so this is the picture in the new version of the book. That chart that I had you drawing earlier is my version of this, what I could make it do on a Word document. So, the which division brings sensory, okay, the afferent division brings sensory information to the CNS from receptors. Receptors are sensory structures that detect changes in the environment or respond to specific stimuli. The efferent division of the peripheral nervous system carries motor commands from the CNS to the effectors. And the effectors are the target organs which respond to motor commands. And I do want you to see something on this chart that I wasn't able to show on my chart. The somatic nervous system controls the skeletal muscle, which we had discussed. The autonomic nervous system has two parts, the parasympathetic division and the sympathetic division. And what I wasn't able to show on my chart is that the sympathetic division controls smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and adipose tissue, whereas the parasympathetic division controls smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands, but not the adipose CT. What happens in sympathetic activation is that the adipocytes are activated to release fatty acids into the bloodstream, triglycerides, for you to use as energy to make ATP as a backup energy source. During parasympathetic division, rest and digest, you don't need to release fats into the bloodstream for energy. You need to do that when you're sword fighting bears. Sword fighting or running from bears, fight or flight. Now I entirely need to see a bit where somebody is sword fighting like in bear suits. That would be hilarious. All right. So sympathetic controls all four of the visceral effectors: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and fat. The parasympathetic division only controls three of the visceral effectors: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. So one way that we could ask questions about this is the skeletal muscle is controlled by, and then you have to pick the best answer. Is the skeletal muscle controlled by the parasympathetic division? No. Sympathetic division? No. ANS? No. SNS? Yes. Efferent division? Yes, but SNS is more accurate because the SNS only controls skeletal muscle. Or we could say, as a test question, smooth muscle and cardiac muscle are controlled by parasympathetic division? Yes, but not only the parasympathetic division. Sympathetic division? Yes, but not only the sympathetic division. ANS? Yes. Efferent? Yes, but that's not the most accurate answer for what controls smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. That would be the ANS. Okay, so that's an example of how test questions can be written about this material. Another favorite test question, we haven't done cyan yet today. What controls all three types of muscle? There are three types of muscle: skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. So sympathetic, no. Parasympathetic, no, because neither of these, or even the ANS, would be wrong answers because they don't also control skeletal muscle. SNS would be a wrong answer because it does not also control smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. So the answer to what controls all three types of muscle, you got to go up a bit in the chart to efferent division, to something that actually controls all three. So this chart and what controls what and the classifications are very important, and they get even more important for test 6, where we dig deeper into the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So that's a thing. All right, so I wanted to cover the top of page 5 in this video while we're at it. So what is the somatic motor system? That's another term for the somatic nervous system. So the somatic nervous system, or SNS, need another color here. What color are we going with? Well, yellow will show. Green, there we go. So the SNS, somatic nervous system, somatic motor system, controls voluntary contractions. This is when you decide to move. You decide to walk across the room or go for a run. The involuntary contractions, this is when your body moves without your conscious decision, like hiccups, sneezes, that thing where you're like almost asleep and then like your whole body, like you, yeah. That's not just me. I know that's not just me. Don't even give me that look. Okay. And then reflexes are automatic responses. So if your hand is on a hot stove, you've got a reflex, a pain reflex, that will pull your hand off the hot stove. It's actually your spinal cord that makes that decision. We'll come back to that. And your hand moves like about the time your brain finds out something happened and your hand's already off the hot stove. So that's a reflex. And the effectors of the SNS are skeletal muscle. Okay. Next, the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, which is also called the visceral motor system, controls. Which one is fight or flight? Sympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. And what does it do to heart rate? What does sympathetic do to digestive gland activity? Okay. And then next says rest and digest. Rest and digest is the parasympathetic division. What does parasympathetic division do to heart rate? Lowers it. What does parasympathetic division do to digestive gland secretion? Got it. Okay, and what are the effectors of the ANS? When they ask the effectors for the ANS, they want all four: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and adipose CT. And what are the basic functional units of the nervous system? Neurons. All right, well, we will start in section 12.2, neurons and neuron anatomy, with the next video. So this has been ANP1, lecture test 5, video 3-ish, in which we discussed parts of 4 and 5 in the notes. Thank you as always for tuning in. It's good to virtually see you here. The education must go on. Dr. J.